The diplomatic chamber on Titan was shaped like a teacup, smooth, white, polished by centuries of arrogance. It hung over the orange horizon of Saturn's moon like a cathedral, wrapped in translucent crystal designed to filter starlight and delusion in equal parts. Ambassador Vorthik of the Vertherii Empire adjusted the slick hem of his ceremonial cape, scales gleaming faintly under the artificial sun. He did not sit. Vertherii did not sit when presiding over the defeated. He loomed instead, claws folded neatly, tail swaying in the measured rhythm of one who has already won. "She is late," he hissed, voice thick with humid condescension. "She is human," replied his aide, a gelatinous thing in a breathing tank. "Tardiness is part of their quaint theater." The door whispered open. Lieutenant Eve Harrow stepped in like she belonged there, boots echoing against marble. Soft, unhurried, human. Her uniform was standard issue navy blue, though pressed to perfection. A faded ribbon fluttered near her shoulder. She carried no weapons, just a tin lunchbox, the kind found in schoolyards 100 years before. "My apologies, darlings," she drawled, southern-touched and warm as firelight. "Was trying to find tea that wouldn't make y'all combust." They watched her as one might a strange animal in dress uniform. She placed the lunchbox on the table, opened it with a quiet snap. Inside were mismatched porcelain cups, 2 bags of dried chamomile, a metal thermos, and 3 homemade cookies wrapped in wax paper. Vorthik blinked twice. "Is this a form of bribe?" She smiled. "Hospitality, sugar. Where I come from, you don't talk about peace unless someone's poured the tea." The chamber's silence thickened. Across the room, a dozen alien delegates, avian, silicon, oxygen drift, shared sideways glances. A murmured string of translations passed through hidden earpieces. Vorthik leaned forward just slightly. "You are here to discuss terms. Earth is dust. Your species is functionally extinct. What purpose does ritual serve?" Eve unscrewed the thermos, steam curling into the room like a lazy ghost. "Maybe none. But grief gets heavy if you don't set it down sometimes." She poured the tea without spilling a drop. The room smelled of soft floral and something hauntingly human, memory. One of the younger diplomats, a shimmering fish-eyed creature from Nix Prime, tentatively accepted a cookie. Eve beamed. "Good choice, sweetheart. Brown sugar and a dash of cayenne." Vorthik did not eat. He sniffed it, snarled, and handed it back. "Earth sends a chef while the stars burn." Eve's eyes, so light they almost glowed in the filtered sun, flicked toward him. Her voice stayed velvet. "Earth sent me because y'all broke the treaty and turned 7 billion lives into a cautionary tale. My baking's just a bonus." He laughed, sharp and mechanical. "You mistake kindness for leverage. Your world died screaming. Your children, your cities, your oceans. They are ash. The Empire regrets nothing. We took what we wanted. You have no cards left to play." Eve stirred her tea. "Funny thing. I don't play cards. I play chess." Vorthik paused. "Explain." She met his eyes. The smile didn't fade, but something older bloomed behind it. Not rage. Not vengeance. Something colder. "You think the war ended when Earth fell. You think this," she motioned to the dome, "is cleanup. A formality. Maybe even mercy. But see, where I come from, we got stories. About firebirds and bone witches. About the ones you shouldn't push too far. And when children were bad, we didn't tell them to fear punishment." She leaned in. "We told them to fear Baba Yaga." A tremor passed through the room. Not physical, but linguistic. One of the bird creatures tilted its head, whispering. Vorthik's pupils narrowed. "Baba Yaga. I've seen the file. An earth myth. Slavic origin. A hut on legs. Cannibalistic. Female." Eve chuckled. "Darlin', she ain't a story anymore." The room dimmed suddenly. A pulse from beneath the moon's surface, deep as a heartbeat. Lights flickered. The holograms lining the walls, projecting victory maps and parade routes, glitched. Lines curved where they should have stayed straight. Ships vanished from the star grid. "Malfunction," Vorthik snapped. "No sugar," Eve said. "It's the checkmate." The fish-eyed diplomat dropped her cookie. There are unauthorized signals in orbit. 8 voices flurried in static. Words like jammed, scrambled, offline rose in panic tones. Eve remained seated, calm, sipping. "Let me tell y'all what we did," she said gently. "We knew you were coming. Years before the first strike. Humanity's got a bad habit of expecting the best and preparing for hell. So we built traps. Not in the sky. In our stories." Vorthic's claws twitched. Traps. We sent folk tales across the stars. Uploaded them to the translator banks. Buried them in your language code. Gave them names like Baba Yaga, Gashitakuro, El Silban. Little bedtime monsters. Creepy, but harmless. You stored them in the culture drives. The lights flickered again. Emergency blue now. And then, she continued, we matched the code names to operations. One myth, one strike. We buried Earth, sure. But we didn't bury our worst. The dome shook. A dull thud echoed from the outer structure. The sound of something big landing. A guard burst into the room, half his face scorched, eyes wide with something no training could erase. "She's here," he shouted. "The Baba Yaga is real." Eve stood finally. The tea cooled. "You killed 7 billion of us," she said softly. "And we grieved. Quietly. But grief has a funny way of boiling down to something sharp. Something that walks. Something that remembers." She stepped around the table. One of the fish-eyed aliens was weeping. Another fainted. Vorthik stared at her as if seeing her for the first time. Not a diplomat, but something ancient in uniform. Eve adjusted her collar. "There ain't nothing left to negotiate, darlin'. Just consequences." And from far above Titan, ships began to scream. Commander Vokretha's mandibles clicked in rhythm with the low hum of the Virex Ultima's warcore, a sound the old strategist found soothing. The flagship had seen 3 centuries of conflict, 17 species conquered, and not a single loss logged in its polished hull. It hovered now above Europa's ice-lock crust, gleaming like a blade too long unsheathed. He peered down at the holographic table. The Earth sector flickered red and silent. No return signals. No life signs. A perfect vacuum. "How many systems now?" he asked quietly, not turning. The officer beside him, a scaled technocrat from the Viscary caste, wavered. 17, Commander. Confirmed gone. No survivors, no wreckage. No transmissions. "No transmissions," Vokreth murmured. "That's new." The others had died loudly, nuclear signatures, hull fractures, thermal blooming. But this was surgical, silent, and worse, intentional. Could be malfunctions, the officer offered weakly, or atmospheric disruptions. Vokreth turned, slowly, deliberately. If Earthlings were capable of malfunctioning, we'd have won that war in a week. He dismissed the aide with a flick of his claw. The door sealed behind her. Alone, he studied the Earth dossier again. It had grown thicker, not thinner, since the genocide. Strange. The war had ended 5 solar years ago. Or so they said. A clean sweep. The destruction of Terra was methodical, justified, and broadcasted. 7 billion deaths in 7 days. An algorithmic masterpiece of extermination. And yet, he tapped a command. A projection burst to life, grainy footage from Station Aurelia, one of the first silent sites. A nursery rhyme played through crackling static. She rides on chicken legs through trees. She eats the brave, she eats the thieves. Then came the scream. Then silence. No survivors. Just the rhyme. Over and over. He pulled up the next file. Same song. Different system. Same ending. His claw hovered over the screen. What did we miss? They thought humans were prey. Predictable. Sentimental. Loud and breakable. But maybe the real mistake was assuming extinction had an end date. Eve Harrow stared out the viewport of her borrowed cruiser, watching debris drift past like lazy stars. Her boots were kicked up on the console, and a thermos of lukewarm coffee balanced on one knee. The stars looked different now, quieter, as if waiting. She didn't mind the silence. She'd been raised in it, born in the subterranean bunkers of old Kansas, 800 meters below what used to be farmland and sky. She'd learned chess before she learned sunlight. The war had been over by the time she was 12. Or that's what they told the bunkers. Peace was a live broadcast through closed doors. Her comms buzzed. Baba Yaga units Theta 3 and Delta 9 have made contact, came the voice. Calm. Male. Neutral. How many survivors, she asked. None. She exhaled, not from relief or grief, but from memory. Any chatter on the net? A pause. Yes. One curious thread. A Vortherii commander. Name, Vokreth. High strategist. He's been studying us. Eve smiled faintly. Good, she said. Let him. Vokreth opened the old human linguistics file for the third time that night. He bypassed the military entries and went straight to folklore. Baba Yaga, he said aloud. Myth. Slavic. Cannibalistic. Non-linear morality. He highlighted the phrase lives in a hut that walks on chicken legs. It was ridiculous. Childlike. Designed to disarm. Which made it dangerous. He tapped into the black site archives, long sealed since the war's end. Files marked human contingency protocols. He opened one. Protocol Scythe. Status. Redacted. Summary. Deployment of biologically enhanced units bred for multi-environment combat and zero sympathy thresholds. Selected for psychopathic resilience, empathy suppression, and mythic identity infusion. Termed Baba Yaga units. Activated only in case of extinction-level breach. His mandibles froze mid-click. They made themselves into stories, he whispered, so we wouldn't believe them when they came back. Another file auto-opened, unauthorized. A voice recording. Human. You broke the sky over our heads and called it peace. You salted our bones with silence. And in the dark, we rewrote the end. He closed his eyes. He could feel it. His first real fear in over 2 centuries. On Proxima Outpost 12, alarm screamed. A single vessel had appeared, no fleet, no escort, just one oblong ship painted matte black with no identifiers. It hovered silently just beyond their defense perimeter. Inside, Commandant Yer shivered despite his multi-layer exosuit. Hail them again. No response. A small hatch opened. Not a missile. Not a pod. A single woman stepped out, suited in old Terran combat armor. Her face was visible. She looked young. She looked tired. She didn't fire. She walked. 5 minutes later, the station ceased transmission. The last image logged showed her drawing a knife. Vokreth stood before the Grand Galactic Council, the first time he'd been summoned in decades. The chamber was full, too full. Every species that once mocked humanity now watched the shrinking war map with dread. I warned you, he said flatly. This was not extermination. It was metamorphosis. The Zeltran speaker, a floating orb of mirrored skin, pulsed crimson. You're saying the humans predicted their own extinction? No, Vokreth said. I'm saying they engineered it. They wanted the world to think them gone, to trigger pity or victory speeches. They wanted to disappear from radar and from fear, to give the galaxy 5 long years to forget how clever they were. And in the dark, they built monsters. Not fleets, not armies, legends. Eve drifted through the charred corridors of a former Vortherii medical outpost. The walls still hissed steam from 100 ruptured vents. Her boots crackled over fragments of scalpel and tooth. She reached into her coat and pulled out a single object, a child's spinning top. Placed it on the floor. Let it spin. A Baba Yaga unit. Unit 12K approached. Female. Pale as frost. Voice monotone. Orders. Next planet's a mining colony. Small. Tactical value minimal. But Eve glanced toward the top. It's where they made the gas that wiped out the Pacific. 12K nodded. Confirmed. Proceeding. The girl was 15. No name. No record. Just a designation and a memory. Eve watched her walk away. Not fast. Not slow. Just certain. Vokreth received a final data stream from one of his operatives before the line was severed. It was a shaky recording from a mining colony on Cyrillin 6. The screen showed fire, and above it, carved into the walls in black fire-resistant gel. You wanted peace. We wanted to be left alone. The feed cut out. Vokreth sat very still. Then he stood, alone in the great chamber. His claws trembled. He finally understood. This wasn't revenge. It was evolution. And Eve? She wasn't the last human. She was the beginning of their second species. A message arrived moments later. Encrypted. Human signature. Voice Eve Harrow. Vokreth, darlin'. You study us like we're math. Like we got patterns. But the problem with humanity is we changed the rules after the final round. You ended the game, sure. But we built a whole new board. She paused. And we don't need 7 billion of us anymore. Just a few with sharp teeth and no bedtime. The message ended with a whisper. You're not fighting survivors. You're fighting consequences. Vokreth stared at the black screen, the hum of his ship suddenly louder than anything he'd ever heard. The wind on Fornax, 7 screamed like metal being peeled from bone, but the child walked through it barefoot. Thin, feral, no more than 12. Her hair was shaved close, her tunic ash-colored and sleeveless, stitched from something unidentifiable. Her eyes, though those were ancient, not in years, but in weight. She didn't blink. The alien guards didn't notice her at first. Or rather, they didn't recognize what she was. They saw a survivor, a stray, a broken piece of a ruined species. By the time the first throat opened in a fountain of arterial green, it was already too late. Unit 17 didn't kill with fury. She killed with purpose. In under 8 minutes, the processing facility, capable of housing 10,000, was quiet. No alarms. No gunfire. Just wind. And silence. And blood cooling in patterns along the floor that almost looked like human fingerprints. Far above, a single camera, left intact, transmitted the footage to the Galactic Defense Council. Vokreth watched it without expression. He replayed it. Paused. Zoomed. The girl had smiled once. Only once. Right after carving the phrase into the wall with the hilt of her blade. We learn from you. Back on the Eulalia, Eve Harrow stood at the edge of the observation deck, cradling a steel mug of black coffee in both hands. Her eyes were fixed on the drifting remains of Station Halcyon, still glowing faintly from the inside like a lantern dying under snow. No motion, no voices, just the afterglow of erasure. Behind her, General Mika Ashram, retired, recalled, reluctant, leaned against the bulkhead. His hair was all silver now, but his stance still spoke of battlefield precision. He sipped quietly from his own mug. You sure this was the only way? He asked, voice raw from disuse. Eve didn't answer right away. She took a long breath. We didn't start the war, she said at last. But we're going to make sure no one forgets how it ended. Mika's eyes dropped to the floor. They think we're savages, he muttered. Monsters. Eve nodded slowly. They're right. We made them right. He flinched. Those kids we bred, Eve. They're not soldiers. They're ghosts. They're mirrors, she replied softly. We just let the galaxy look into them. At the Grand Archive of Zyril, nestled in the crystal mountains of the scholar race Naivani, archivist Sinos VA replayed the final data logs from Earth. Unlike others, the Naivani hadn't celebrated the war. They'd mourned it distantly, respectfully, as one mourns a comet passing too close. But now the records didn't match. The timelines bent. The patterns fractured. Sinos VA played a clip from Earth's final broadcast again. Static. Then a child's voice. She walks at dusk, she knocks thrice. Don't light the fire. Don't pay the price. The words weren't in any human tactical manual, but they echoed. He cross-referenced them with pre-war Earth literature, nursery rhymes, myths, psychological warfare tactics? Perhaps. Yet something deeper throbbed beneath them, a rhythm. The Naivani didn't believe in gods, but they did believe in symbols. And humans, it seemed, had decided to become one. Vokreth sat in the command chair of his second dreadnought, his first now space dust, and studied a 3D rendering of the Baba Yaga protocol. It was a mere silhouette, labeled unverified, floating amidst dozens of redacted files. He leaned forward, resting his chin on 2 folded claws. They named them after witches, he murmured. His science officer, a crystalline being named Driss, flickered into view. Yes, sir. Folklore repurposed as fear vector. Is that what you think this is? Fear. Driss hesitated. It's more than that. They seeded the entire war with story. And now, Driss's glow dimmed. Now the stories are coming true. Vokreth turned his gaze to the viewport. Dozens of stars shimmered, but only one mattered. Soul. And what they'd done to it. They let us think we'd won, he said, almost with reverence. They let us build monuments. Celebrate victory. But all the while, Driss nodded. They were building monsters. One of those monsters now stood in an abandoned cathedral on the ruins of Mars. The structure had been left untouched, no tactical value. Red sand blew through its shattered stained glass, and pews sat collapsed under centuries of dust. Unit 23F knelt in the aisle, alone. She lit a candle. She didn't pray. She had no religion, no memories beyond the implantation files, the language lessons, and the kill list. But something in her stirred, watching the flame. An old habit, not hers, Earth's. A voice crackled through her calm status. She stood, replied flatly, quiet. All targets neutralized. Pause. Then she added, almost too softly to register. They used to believe in something here. No response came. Only static. And wind. Vokreth watched the tactical board collapse in real time. System after system blinking out. Not in fire, but in absence. Entire colonies silenced. Civilizations vanished. No diplomacy. No demands. Just extinction, fast and surgical, like the very thing the Empire once prided itself on. Humanity had learned from the architects of its genocide, and then improved upon it. At an outpost near the edge of the Trinari Nebula, a diplomat named Cerilyn, young, hopeful, naive, received a private broadcast on an outdated frequency. Against protocol, she opened it. It was a video. Static at first. Then a woman appeared. Human. Calm. Her voice gentle, with an accent Cerilyn couldn't quite place. My name is Eve Harrow. I'm not here to make threats. I'm here to make introductions. Behind her, shadows moved. Tall. Silent. Watching. You thought the war was over. But that wasn't war. That was panic. That was scrambling fleets and counting cities. That was trying to match chaos with control. She leaned in. What you killed wasn't the real war. She smiled faintly. You see, real war waits. It learns. It whispers lullabies while it sharpens its teeth. The screen cut to black. No command. No declaration. Just a final whisper. We became the thing your nightmares copy. Cerilyn sent the broadcast to her superiors, trembling. They never replied. A week later, her planet ceased transmissions. Eve stood at the edge of the garden dome aboard Eulalia, watching green leaves sway under artificial wind. The scent of tomato vines filled the air. General Oshram joined her. They're starting to ask what our endgame is. She didn't turn. They'll find out. You sure this wasn't vengeance? No, she said. If it were vengeance, we'd have let them scream. He hesitated. And what is it then? She looked up, past the dome, toward the stars they used to name. A lesson. He didn't speak again. He didn't need to. Because far beyond them, another Empire fleet had gone dark. No weapons deployed. No resistance. Only one thing left behind, etched into metal hull with something far sharper than a blade. You made U.S. monsters. You taught U.S. how. And the lesson had only just begun. Smoke curled like prayer from the broken spires of Dareth Prime, a city once sculpted from living crystal and song. Now it burned, its choirs silenced. Charred fragments of its famed harmonium domes floated through the dawn like ash-filled snow. The survivors, those few who hadn't yet fled, spoke in whispers, terrified not of the destruction, but of how quiet it had been. No warnings. No ships on the scanners. Just a flicker of static. Then darkness. Then silence. And carved into the walls of the palace, using tools too precise for any soldier. Monsters aren't born. They're taught. Commander Vokreth stood before the last functioning communications node in the quadrant, shoulders hunched, clawed hands trembling beneath his command robes. He had not slept, had not fed, had not blinked in hours. Behind him, aides spoke in half-sentences, data streams falling apart mid-sentence, as more systems vanished from the board. "This is extermination," one whispered. "No," Vokreth corrected, voice dry as bone. "Extermination is fast. This is memory." He turned back to the hologram of Earth. A black sphere now. No light. No satellites. Dead by all known definitions. But it had birthed something far more enduring. The Baba Yaga units weren't soldiers. They were punctuation marks. Sentences written in ash and silence. He tapped his claw against the final transmission from Outpost Karansel 9. The footage was dim, corrupted, but clear enough. A figure, female, dragging a torch behind her across the metal floor. Sparks trailed her steps. Blood smeared in her wake. A guard fired. She didn't dodge. She didn't flinch. The bullet struck her shoulder and embedded itself, but she moved like a metronome, unbroken. She reached the main reactor and spoke into a console with a child's softness. 7 billion lights went out. Let's see how dark it gets. Then she smiled and ignited the fuse. The outpost vanished from the galaxy 30 seconds later. Vokreth shut the projection off. He no longer had the luxury of disbelief. He had seen war. This wasn't war. This was something far older. A species reclaiming its mythos. On the edge of the galaxy, in a jungle of glass trees and cyan fog, Eve Harrow stood in front of a boy barely old enough to shave. Unit 31L, brown-skinned, barefoot, eyes calm like a lake right before lightning hits. "Name?" she asked. "None," he replied. "Last lesson?" He looked down at the rifle in his hands, old Earth design, polished wood and steel. Then back at her. "Don't pull the trigger unless the silence means more than the sound." She nodded. "What do you see when you look at them?" "Cowards," he said. "No," she corrected. "Worse. Teachers." He didn't understand at first. Not fully. But he would. Behind them, a camp of 3 Baba Yaga units rested in absolute stillness. No talking. No laughter. Just tuning of weapons. Quiet sharpening of blades. The eerie hum of nanite swarms being calibrated in meditation-like stillness. This was humanity distilled, not at its peak, but at its breaking point. Not its intellect, but its resolve. "Tell me again what they did," she said. "They killed our world." She stepped closer. "No. They taught us what happens when you mistake mercy for weakness. When you assume silence means surrender. When you put fire to the wrong species." She put a hand on his shoulder. "And now they get to learn what regret feels like." At the Grand Parliament of the Empire, dignitaries screamed over one another as the galactic map shrank by the hour. Hundreds of systems gone. No declarations. No demands. Just evidence. Ambassador Clark, a soft-bodied statesman from the Cephalari Dominion, slammed his appendage against the voting slab. "We demand answers. How can one species, one, devour an empire?" Vokreth stepped forward, his voice cutting through the chaos like a blade. "They're not a species anymore." The room quieted. He raised a claw and pointed to the screen, where a transmission from the annihilated planet Orison played. A woman, standing in the heart of fire, whispered, "We outgrew the need for planets. You killed our roots. Now you get the storm." They don't think like us. They don't build empires. They don't hold territory. They're not after control. Then what do they want? Clark hissed. Vokreth took a long breath. They want to be remembered. Not as victims. Not even as victors. Just as the last thing you ever think about before the end. Silence fell again. The Parliament fell apart within the week. Unit 12K crouched on the upper ridge of Kelnos, 4, watching as the alien governor fled across the landing field, dragging 2 of his children behind him. Her orders were clear, but something gave her pause. The children looked up, terrified. Not of her. Of their father. She blinked, and somewhere in her mind an echo surfaced. A memory not hers. A mother burned in the first wave, screaming into the void. No help coming. The moment passed. She fired once. Precise. Surgical. Only the father fell. She holstered the weapon, walked past the children and whispered, "Monsters don't kill children. They raise them to be monsters." Eve stood on the bridge of Eulalia, her hands behind her back, watching the funeral of stars through the reinforced glass. Nebulas wept color. Moons broke into dust. Whole fleets imploded like dying sighs. A message blinked on the console. She opened it. It was from Vokreth. Short. Terse. "I understand now. But why didn't you just stop us when you could?" She typed. "Because you don't teach with warnings. You teach with consequences." She closed the message. And finally, she allowed herself to sit. They told us humans were gone. Beside him, on the wall, the lights flickered. Then a rhyme played through the security system. "Baba Yaga's house is made of bone. She knocks once, she's not alone." He covered his ears. The wall behind him creaked. Vokreth fled. For all his pride, all his victories, he fled. He took one ship, cloaked it, and headed for uncharted space. He didn't bring soldiers or aids. He brought data cores, recordings, everything he'd learned. And when he reached the edge of the known galaxy, he stopped, stared at the void. Then he began to record. "This message is not a warning," he began, voice thin. "It is a lesson. I saw the humans fall, and I watched them rise, not as a people, but as a reckoning. They shed their skin, became legend, myth. They didn't come to conquer. They came to correct." He paused. "They're not monsters. They're the answer to a question we should never have asked." Behind him, a faint sound. A footstep. He turned. Eve stood in the airlock, dressed in worn combat boots, and a coat that looked far too civilian for the weight she carried. Vokretha's jaw trembled. "How did you find me?" She smiled softly. "Darlin', you left a trail of regret. I just followed it." He dropped the recorder. "Is this the end?" "No," she said. "This is the lesson." She took a step closer. Her voice dropped to a whisper. "Never forget what made us. You did. You all did." He nodded slowly. And then she did something he never expected. She handed him the recorder. "Tell the stars." She turned. Left him alive. Because not all monsters kill. Some just make sure the story survives. And in the distance, the stars blinked one by one, like eyelids closing on a galaxy ready to sleep beneath a nightmare it taught to walk.